Welcome to the program. This is the first of the program we are doing for Economynext on the pre-election coverage. We have here in the studio Eran Wickramaratne, who was former State Minister of Investment, and we also have Indika Sakalasurya as my co-host. Eran, it's a tough task for SJB, your party, right? At one point, you were about to win the presidential election, and then you lost, right? Since then, we have seen the internal party conflict as usual, in Sri Lankan politics. How confident are you about winning the election, personally and the party-wise?
Yeah, we are clearly contesting to actually form a government. If you go about it in a traditional way, you get a UNP president, he gets 40% of the UNP vote base, and then to make it 50 plus 1, he'll get the floating votes. The floating vote will be 10% or 15%. If the SLFP presidential candidate, it would be the same. And then after the presidency, they would go into a general election. And when you go into the general election, then there's a tendency for the vote base to go in that direction and for them to form a government. The difference here is that this president has been elected on a party vote base of 3%. Let's say we multiplied by 300%. Let's say a party vote base of 10%. Still 32% of the votes he got it from floating voters or he got it from the SLPP. Now, in a general election, it's a little different. You're not voting for the individual. You're voting for your representative from your district, your village, or your town, or whatever. So personalities do matter, not only parties. And therefore, I expect that vote base that Eran Wickramaratne got to actually go down in a parliamentary election. Now, the challenge we have is actually to hold our vote base. Because when you lose a presidential election, people tend to get sometimes discouraged and say, what's the point of going to the polls or whatever. So that's one group.
Nobody wants to vote for a losing party, right?
It's a psychological thing. And therefore, if they do go and we hold the base and everybody have the urge to go to the polling station and vote, then it's relative. When that's coming down and we go up, then the number of seats that we get will actually go up. So that's one thing. Then there's another sentiment, right, that's created, and often these sentiments are created. I remember before the presidential election, somebody came to see me and they came in a three-wheeler, and then I said to them, how did you come? They said, I came in a three-wheeler. The three-wheel driver said, we are for Malimawa. Then I go some other office and I meet somebody there, and it's a government office, and then somebody will come and say, everybody here is for the Malimawa. My heavens, I thought the way people were talking, not 50%, they'll get 60%. And then at some point, other presidents have got 60%. And then at some point, I thought, my heavens, the conversation is going, they're going to get 70%. And then when I looked at the result, it was only 42%. So now, similarly, you make stories. No? Similarly, there is another story that's being developed, right? And that story goes something like this. Now you have a president. It's better to put a government from the same party, because then they will be able to do what they have to do, right? That is also a bit of a fallacious argument.
I think that sentiment comes from the experience, because we have never done well when there are two parties. One party from president from one party and prime minister and the government from another party.
Yeah, I don't agree with you. 2015, 2019, I was in government. Please tell me what you saw that didn't work properly.
Well, more than that,
that's why you didn't get
citizen sacked Ranil Wickramaratne.
No, that's why you didn't get re-elected.
No. Getting elected is one thing. You mustn't forget, getting elected depends on the situation and the circumstances at that time. And that election was basically determined, right, on the basis of security becoming the number one concern after the Easter bombing, right? And now the evidence is emerging that the Easter bombing was orchestrated. And I said that right from the beginning. I was the first MP to go publicly and say that there was a big brain behind the Easter bombing. So I think elections can be determined by incidences or public
That's true.
sentiment.
That's true, Eran. But thing is, during that government, many of the promises you made to the public could not be implemented. For instance, busting the corruption and basically punishing those people who have hidden money outside the country. You all tried your best, but you couldn't do anything, right?
And also,
the difference between then President Maithripala Sirisena and then Prime Minister Ranil Wickramaratne was also contributed to that.
Chair, I completely disagree with you, particularly on promises. The politics of Sri Lanka has been promises right along. I can go president after president, prime minister after prime minister, and talk about promises that were made and promises not kept. In fact, I was shocked that Economynext was going the same path, talking about promises to basically win elections. I thought they'll just step away from it. So I don't accept the promises thing. I would say definitely they didn't keep promises, but there are lots of elections in which promises haven't been kept. Differences between the president and the prime minister, yes, there are differences. But I'm asking this question. We saw the economy coming down. We saw the danger to the economy. They had to make a change in the finance minister, you see, and they decided they need to put a senior hand in that. They brought Mangala Samaravira in. Mangala said, it's not my subject. I prefer to be in foreign affairs. But if Iran agrees to come to the finance ministry with me, then I will take it. I went with him. We were there with the IMF. We negotiated a fiscal consolidation program. We raised the country's revenue in 2.5 years from 10% of GDP to nearly 13% of GDP. Nobody complained about inflation or food prices. Nobody complained about interest rates. We had stable interest rates. We had basically prices were stable, a relatively stable exchange rate. Right, and the macroeconomy was relatively stable. Gotabaya Rajapaksa comes. He goes around the country. He makes a case out and say, if I come, I'll cut the taxes. You can sell that. Winning elections is one thing. Doing the right thing can be different.
But even before that, around 2018 election, SLPP got a landslide victory. Right?
Correct. They did win.
That's before the Easter Sunday.
Yeah, certainly there are trends that went in that direction. I won't say no, right? So then Gota goes around the country, right? And everybody, including the business community, said, who doesn't like tax cuts? People didn't think very far, right? And then he came, the taxes were cut. They went around the country, right? And they said, we are now, the president is from our party. We need to have a government now to really strengthen the president, to deliver on the promises. Same party president, same party government. That's why I'm saying that argument, I don't accept it at all. It just took a little over a year. The economy collapsed completely. It's not a question about having the same party government and the same party president. It's a question about following the right policies and having the right people in there. That's important. In a democracy, there can be differences of opinion. It's better to have the differences of opinion rather than have to have the economy collapse like it has collapsed. So that is why I don't buy that argument for a moment, right? In fact, I would go one step further and I would say, beware and be careful. You say, if, right, a party gets a majority, and they have had majorities previously, right, including, when I was in school, the United National Party, right? There are positives to it and there are negatives to it. And some negatives can outweigh the positives, you see. So I would say this idea that the government has to come from the same party and the president from another party is necessarily bad. If we get the largest number of seats, we will form a government. We are not running in this to be the strongest opposition. We are running in this election to be the government of the country. And if we do that, right, we will be supporting the newly elected president. He said he will go after corruption. We'll completely support him. We want to see corruption. Those who are corrupt, basically brought before the courts, not in any other way, judicial processes, and they are convicted and they are punished. He said he wants to have, create a society where the law is being upheld. Completely agree with him on that. It should be upheld. The law must be upheld. We will support him on implementing the law. He said constitutional reform is needed. JVP has been shouting and screaming for 30, 40 years, saying that they want to abolish the executive presidential system. Please ask them to bring it. We will support the reform of the system.
So basically what you say is there is little difference between your policy and JVP policy.
Yes, on the governance issues, there is little difference. The differences do actually come on the economy, and those differences could be big. You say, so Sri Lanka has gone into a program with the IMF on fiscal consolidation based on revenue. I can't understand, right, because I was involved in the earlier program. Why the IMF didn't go to a fiscal consolidation not based on revenue? To their credit, I would say they talked about governance issues. But why didn't they go more drastically on costs? I've run a bank. Others have run companies. When you are in trouble, what's the first thing you look at? First thing you look at is cost before you look at revenues, right? Cost savings, eliminating wastage, reform, right? Whether it's the armed forces, whether it's the public service, whether it's state-owned enterprises, whether it's labor laws, whether it's laws to attract foreign direct investment, reforms are needed. What are the chances of these people actually bringing these reforms in a government? It's a much better chance, right? If those who are NPP rather than JVP, right, are there, and then you have the SJB actually forming a government, the chances are that will be the best solution for the country.
So you are talking about a kind of a national government situation.
And we don't know. That depends on the number of seats, right? We certainly, if we have the majority of seats and we are the largest party in parliament, I'm sure lots of smaller parties will rally around us to form a government.
Eran, in other words, what you say is like Sajith Premadasa is ready to work with Anura. Is it? As a party, you are saying that SJB is ready to work with Anura.
There is no question of personalities here. It's the way the constitution is and how the system will work. President is already elected and he's president. And then we are electing a parliament and the government comes from the party which has the majority in parliament. And we are seeking a mandate to get the majority in parliament so that we can work with him. And that is going to be the better solution for the country. Because fundamentally, there's going to be a clash of ideology. And I'm sure the NPP and the SJB, the ideological differences could be smoothed out. But the ideological differences between those who have a liberal economic outlook and the JVP, which doesn't have a liberal economic outlook, are vast. They're very, very big, never to be underestimated. Are they going to go through reforms of the public sector? Are they going to cut the numbers in the public sector? Everybody you talk to in this country will complain to you about the public sector. Whether they go to the local council or to the municipal council to get something, or whether it's about getting some connection, utility connections for their companies, or whether it is setting up a factory, or whether it is getting land, you name it, people will complain. So public sector reform is absolutely essential. Right. And then obviously, right, today the armed forces is nothing to do with numbers. Today it's to do with technology. Investments even in the armed forces must be for technology and in intelligence. That's where armed forces actually succeed. That shift needs to be done, right? Then if you look at other reforms, you look at the youth population in this country, right? Education reforms, absolute must, has to be done. There was a select committee in parliament, right, in January, appointed in January, 6 months of deliberations. A report is written and the select committee was on higher education. And we came to some conclusions on higher education. What were the conclusions that we came to? We said, right, that government must spend more and more on education. And there was a logic behind that. Sri Lanka has only one major USP. That's our geographical location. We are an island on the busiest sea, one of the busiest sea routes in the world. We are the gateway to the largest subcontinent in the world. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, the largest subcontinent, the fastest growing economic subcontinent in the world. We are the gateway to that subcontinent, right? So we need to make the opportunity actually, how are we going to really benefit from it? So the other USP apart from geography is our human resources. We have to create it as a USP. Every child in this country, every student in this country needs a higher education. Some to university, some to professional education, some to vocational education, every student. So in that select committee, we agreed, increase the spend on free education from a little over 1% of GDP to 2, 3, 4%, whatever, gradually let's go there. We agreed that the supply of education cannot be only government. That's ridiculous, right? And we said even the private sector should be legitimized and recognized for the contribution they are making. We said non-government, non-profit distributing sector.
Some of these are contradictory to what JVP or Anura's party say, right? They don't want privatize. They don't want to privatize education. They don't want to kind of. They actually want to reverse some of the reforms the previous government did.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, in this committee, we agreed on that, and we also agreed that non-government, non-profit distributing sector, and worldwide, you take the top universities in the world, they're not profit distributing. They may be fee-levying, but they're non-government, they're private, the top universities in the world. Right? And we said that is also legitimate. Foreign universities, institutions, we said can set up in this country. Sri Lanka could become even an educational hub for this region. This opportunity is there. So this is what we said. Government's role is regulation, making sure that there's quality in the things that are done, even in education centers. We agreed that. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa, minister, chairman of the committee, he calls up and he says, we have to sign this report. He asked me, Eran, do you agree? I read it. I said, we agree. We came to sign it. On the day we came to sign it, Dr. Harini Amarasuriya did not come. She sent a letter why she couldn't sign it, and all the reasons, and it will weaken the Sri Lankan education university system and so forth. My point is this. My point is exactly, Shiha, what you said, is that the JVP's philosophy prevails over the NPP's. And their philosophy is that the state not only owns the means of production and distribution, it applies to education too, that the state is the provider. That's why, looking back in history, we were just kids then, they blocked some private university, medical university, going to the period of J.R. Jayawardena. Then I was a member of parliament when Mahinda Rajapaksa's government brought a proposal to install a private university, Saitam. I remember talking to all the MPs and saying, we must support it. It doesn't matter that we are in opposition. We all got together and we supported it, right? We supported it. And then there were lots of issues. And I remember Dr. Harsha was also trying to intervene. Harsha De Silva was trying to intervene to try to actually create a better understanding. All that happened. What happened a little later? They got on the street, they held the boards, they got Saitam closed as well. So the JVP does not believe, they believe only in the state and the state providing it. And they hold hard to that. Now there may be people, right, they are in front who say, oh, that's not our policy now, the NPP policy is this and so forth. I'm telling you, please don't underestimate that. Cadres have given their lives for these causes. 2 revolutions have happened in this country, 1970s and in the late 1980s. In my view, people have been brainwashed. They think in a particular way. They're not open to other ideas. Those people are not just going to walk away, right, from what they actually believe. So the opposition to this government is not going to be external. It's going to come internally first. That is why I say, right, if we form a government, we will work with this president. We will have a common ground which we will create, not swinging from one extreme to the other extreme. And we can go forward. So this is why I'm saying people have to really, really think very, very hard. I can give you another example, Sheha. Right? In Parliament one day, right, in a committee, we were having a debate. And the debate was, I was pushing the idea of an independent public service. Because I believe in an independent public service. I may be the minister, I come up with a proposal, the secretary should be able to say with me, I agree with you, minister. Or the secretary should be able to say, minister, you need to amend it like this. Or the secretary should be able to say to me, I disagree with this. This is not possible for A, B, C, D reason, maybe legal, maybe economic return, or whatever the reason is, should be able to say. That's an independent public service. right? That's what I have strived for. Sri Lanka lost its independent public service, and therefore this has come under the rule of MPs and ministers, which is unacceptable. We should go more in the direction of an independent public service. Lots of developed countries have it. India has it as well, independent public service. We just had Montek Singh Ahluwalia a few months ago in Sri Lanka, and he spoke at an event. And then later I was with him in a discussion, and he told me one day he was standing there with his minister, Manmohan Singh, and a journalist walked up to him and said, you all come in and you all change everything. Because when Manmohan Singh was finance minister, he brought all the reforms that were needed. And that was change. And then Manmohan Singh looked at the journalist and said, "You're right, I am change." And then he pointed at Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who was the permanent secretary, and said, "This is continuity. Continuity." So an independent public service, permanent secretaries, gives the country continuity, right? Which we don't have. Now, the reason I'm raising it is, if you look at Marxist ideology, right? My first degree was also in politics, right? And I studied these things very deeply. I'm very socially conscious, stand strongly for social justice, and some in my party call me the socialist in the party. But we need to be realistic. While we have to do that, we need to recognize that it is the private sector that creates wealth. It's a private sector that creates jobs. It's a private sector that does the exports. And we get our foreign reserves from that. And we need to recognize that. We create social justice by taxing them, taking that tax, cushioning the vulnerable, eliminating malnutrition, take caring of pregnant mothers, take caring of children as they develop and evolve. And then in the other extreme corner, we have senior citizens. When I was young, I saw only one of my grandparents. 3 had died in their 50s. Today, people live till they are 80, 90, and 100. And we have a moral obligation, and we also have, government has an obligation also to protect senior citizens. The people in the middle, we shouldn't create a dependency culture by just giving them handouts like Samurdi and all these nonsense political programs that went on for so long. We did get rid of that. We need to, people in the middle, we need to provide them the tools. If it's education, if it's reskilling, provide them the tools so that they can go into the market and to the marketplace. Now, why I said this story is for this important point. If you have a Marxist philosophy, you think that what the politicians take, the decisions that they take, right, should be implemented. And therefore, the public service should be under the political authority. So that day in committee, when I clashed with Vasudeva Nanayakkara, right, and he was arguing not for an independent public service, I went home and I realized where it was coming. It was coming from a deep-held view, ingrained, right, in Marxist socialism, that the political authority is a final decision maker and others are implemented. And I have a different view. I talk about basically an independent public service where it's a check and balance against political authority decisions. So we have a lot to think carefully before we go into this election.
But it's an ideological point, right? In a democracy, people vote for politicians. So, but it's like, having an independent central bank. So there's this argument always comes. So, the people vote for politicians, and then the real power is held by the officials. Is that what you're sort of in India? We can see that there were sort of a lot of friction between sometimes between the politicians and these officials, bureaucrats. So that can also cause a lot of disruptions.
No, I think that the checks and balances are much better, and you have to have disagreements. How does our system work? I was State Minister of Finance. Our system works like this. Our system works that somebody gets a bright idea. I need to have an airport. And then they think about their village or their district. This is a real situation in this country, right? And then they bring the project. They get the project written up by their people and their ministry. They send it to the Ministry of Finance, right, for comments, right, for comments. And then it is brought to the cabinet. And at the cabinet, basically it goes through, because generally governments are in majority, and if it's bought by a president or a prime minister, it just goes through. No independent project evaluation to whether to think that this project should be done or not. No independent evaluation. So what did we do? We went with the projects, no capital, we did it on borrowed money. Benefits might come in 30, 40, 50 years. Loan repayments start in 5 years. Naturally, liquidity problem, country goes bankrupt. We had several of these projects, airports, then we had harbors, we had cricket stadiums, we had conference centers, all hard infrastructure projects, right? But no returns. Now, independence means this as well, right? I would argue that we will even put a ministry of planning and plan implementation. And the project will be sent. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It can come from a minister. It can come from the public. It is sent, right, basically to the independent authority. They do an evaluation. And if they say the project cannot be done or should not be done, right, then even the cabinet should be approving it. That's the check and balance that you need. Just think about it. Who goes into the cabinet? It's just ordinary people, people's representatives. Go in there. They may have the skills, they may not have the skills. But then they have to depend on other people. Somebody falls ill, right? We may not have a doctor in the family, but we go to the doctor. And then the doctor says what needs to be done. We can accept it or reject it. That's a different matter. And if you want, kill ourselves. Right? This is what the country is doing. That is why I'm arguing for independent public service, and we need to have plan implementation, right? Planning and plan implementation. Sri Lanka had both these features, right? And with the constitution, new constitution, they were all done away with. And I think we should definitely reinstate that if we are going to take the country forward. Otherwise, I can see, my heavens, we are saying we are bankrupt now. I can see that we are going to get into an even bigger problem.
Going back to earlier point, Eran, that you mentioned about SJB forming a government that you are in this election to win. So, but if you look at the numbers, like from 2019, 2020 election, the SJB voter numbers have been shrinking. So, how confident are you that this time it'll be different?
Yeah, so that is, for the public to decide and for the voter to decide. And that's why I'm making this case out clearly. We have to really think very far, right? We have to think very, very far, right? If we take it lightly and we think that, my heavens, we just want to change, right? I know we can be dissatisfied with what we have seen, but that doesn't mean that we can make the wrong decision. So one of the other big cons that was really invented was nothing happened for 75 years. I was not a politician. I became a politician more recently. I was basically born in Colombo, went to a government school, right? I was fortunate to get a free education, went into university, came and worked for an international bank, then worked for a Sri Lankan bank, and led a normal life, right? And that's how I basically, evolved in life. So it is a question about really the individual. It's a question about access. It's a question about opportunity. That's what we have to actually create. If we don't create that, I think the country has no future. If you for a moment think that, in some way the government can actually resolve those issues, that will not happen. So, as I said, so if you look at it in the general way after an election, how the votes happen, you can come to the conclusion that you are actually coming to. But I think we have a responsibility to actually say it. And I said that in 2015 during the election as well. I said this is going to end up in a disaster, but people wouldn't believe it. And then people told me, oh, you're not realistic. You need to understand how the electoral process works and how people are thinking and all. I think, if people are even thinking in a particular way, I think we have a responsibility to tell them exactly how it can actually turn out, and because they are not going to look at it like that. So this is not a question about this is theoretical, right? It's a question about how do you win the election, how are you going to get the seats. If you win the election, you need to win the election by actually telling people how the country can be actually changed. Think about it. Fiscal consolidation is okay. Cost cutting is okay. Ultimately, you will need investment. because the economy can't grow without investment, right? So you have to attract investment. Sri Lanka's savings rates are low comparatively even with Asian countries like India and China. We are low. So we need direct foreign investment. We need to create an infrastructure where people will actually have confidence to invest. So when you're going to invest, what do you look at it? First thing you look at is country risk. And then the country risk you look at it is, before you get into the economics of it, is whether there's a rule of law in this country. If a foreign investor is coming and he does a contract with you, then he wants to be confident that if there's a dispute, you go to the courts, that the courts will decide it based on judicial principles. If they do a contract with the government, they want to have the confidence that it will be decided on a judicial process. So country risk factors. What's the track record of the country, right? They will want to look at that. Then they will want to look at the environment, approvals. How long does it actually take to approve? You say, I saw a message that came to me today. It said Singapore will register a company in 24 hours. I have been saying recently, young people, let them just do it. Don't worry about their registration. We'll take care of it later. He says, but Singapore says in 24 hours they will register it. Right? If somebody wants to get a piece of land, they want to open an office, a factory, or something like that. What a mess this is, right? Because the people who are working for these institutions, if you work for the UDA, you think the land belongs to the UDA. If you work for the railways, you think the land belongs to the railway. If you work for the CTB, you think the land belongs to the CTB. Like these government institutions think that the land belongs to them. Land belongs to the citizens of the country. It's their asset. That is why I'm promoting the idea. We create a land bank. The MCC grant was being taken to digitalize basically our geographies. That was the beginning of that process. And then we assume all that into one place so that you can then decide how to allocate the land and for what purpose you're going to allocate the land. That's such a long process. So why would an investor come? It will take him 2 years just to get the basics sorted out when he wants it sorted out. If he has a dispute, it will take him 5 years before he gets a dispute sorted out in the courts. He wants it done in 5 months. Otherwise, he won't be coming here. Now, in addition to those problems that anyway exist, which we need to see how we can resolve them and create a better climate, in addition to that, right, they have other issues as well. They are very concerned about things like political interference, right? They are very concerned about bribery and corruption, right? Very concerned about that. And Sri Lanka's, index is fairly high. So they reject and they say, we won't come. And then this time, the additional thing they'll have to be concerned about is they may have a minister of industries and a minister of investment and a minister of something else, who are the people who were basically the trade union leaders. They were up there, right? They called people out, private sector industries, strikes were called out. They couldn't do their production. People who had to meet export deadlines, right, couldn't keep their export deadlines. They don't realize that if a company doesn't keep their export deadline, the next order is not going to come to that company in this country. It will go to another country, right? These things are not understood. And because the reason is some of these people have never worked. They took a microphone into their hands at the age of 15. At the age of 25 or so, they have their microphone. At the age of 55 or so, they are talking in the microphone. Of course, they are very clever at speaking. Because of 40 years, if you speak, you better be clever at least at that. But if you have never ever worked anywhere, right, what I'm saying about an order getting delayed, right, they're thinking that I'm talking through my head. Right? They don't understand that that consumer company at the other end is not going to wait. They're going to give that to Bangladesh or to Vietnam or some other emerging country or Malaysia or Africa now, right? That they will be giving it away. So this is why I'm saying that sensitivity is not there. And that is why we need to get the proper people need to be there. People are going to look at policy, they're going to look at history, they're going to look at country risk, and they're going to look at the people behind it. And this is also a story about Manmohan Singh. And the reason I'm talking to you about Manmohan Singh is that the reforms that Manmohan Singh did still continue. Governments have changed from Congress to BJP. The policies continue. 30 years later, India becomes the fastest growing economy in the world. Right decisions have to be taken. Results might take time to come. Some things you won't get immediate results. But the right decisions and the right things need to be done. And Manmohan Singh, one day, because now he did the reforms, And then the exchange rate adjustment did happen. When it happened, he had a personal gain because he had worked in Geneva. He had some kind of a deposit, or I don't know, savings. So if there's a devaluation, you have a gain there. You know what he did? He made a public declaration. I have this is my gain. And he took the gain and he donated to some government fund. What's the lesson in it? The lesson in it is, right, policy is important. All the other things I said is important. But the people behind it are also important because investors need to have trust. And only then this can go forward. So lots of challenges. That's why I'm saying we have to really think what's best for the country.
Eran, you said while you were talking about, you were agreeing, you agree most of Anurukumara Dissanayaka's policies. You said there's a difference
on the rule of law.
No, economy, right? You said economy, we have a difference.
No, economy there is, but on the rule of law we agree and we can back it. On the economy,
yes,
the NPP people are more likely to be cooperating than the JVP.
But
so you see a clear difference between NPP and JVP within their camp?
Of course. I mean, it will be foolish to think otherwise. I mean, you listen to the comments even in these 30 days after the election. One person is saying one thing one day and another person is saying another thing. I can quote to you example after example, but I won't do that. So there's clearly an internal conflict, and that's not surprising. Not surprising at all because they have held different views for too long.
Let's get back to you, Eran. How ready are you for the election? Because my understanding is that you had a very limited time period to get launch a campaign and all that. How ready are you?
You're absolutely right, Indika. I came in late into it because I was thinking that maybe the time had come that there should be new people. And I was also making my argument strongly that there should be young people and there should be women in this. But then the party prevailed, they had a long discussion, and they felt this was absolutely not the time for me to quit. And the leader of the party, Sajid Premadasa, said, you will be needed, particularly, he said, in the chamber, in parliament. You are needed there, right? And then so I signed right at the end, just before nominations closed. And I came into it because if I had taken the decision earlier, then I would have had probably a month more preparation. But that doesn't mean, right, that I'm going to be running behind. I'm running at full speed, right? And I'm doing my utmost because once I have taken a decision, I go flat out. With that decision. And it's up to people to decide. This is a democracy. People can decide. And if they do decide, right, I'll be playing my role strongly. I'll be playing my role because I came into politics, giving up my career. I probably had another 10 years to go. And I gave it up and came because I want to see a systems change, right? Lots of people measure politics by, is there a building in his name, or is there a tower in his name, or an airport in his name, or this kind of thing. I'm not there. I'm for systems change. I'm for, right, a very stable macroeconomy. I'm not for telling businessmen what they should do. They know about their businesses a lot more than politicians. Just create the macroeconomy, a stable macroeconomy. Let them take decisions. I'm for basically eliminating corruption, strengthen Seabog. I brought a private members bill, 2 private members bill. One was I brought a private members bill basically on the special commodity levy after the sugar scam, saying that Parliament must approve, if taxes are being changed. Then I brought a private members bill that all assets and liabilities, right, should be made public. I brought that private members bill as well. The government brought a bill on anti-corruption. They included most of the provisions of my private members bill, and I was so happy for it. So those have a big impact on people, but the people don't really recognize it. Then I will bring in the stolen assets recovery bill, so that we create the environment to go after corruption. Then I have been arguing that we need to create an independent public prosecutor. Absolutely important, create an independent public prosecutor. I'm minister today, tomorrow I'm a robber, right? And my advisor as a minister, my lawyer, is the Attorney General's department. Now they had to put a case against me tomorrow. That just won't happen. It's a conflict. Create an independent public prosecutor. So when cases are put, When governments change, cases are not withdrawn. The cases have to actually continue. Then other thing we should do is, I'm arguing that let's put a centralized revenue collection authority. You hear complaints. I don't need to tell you, businessman. I don't need to tell you whether you're dealing with Indian revenue or customs or excise or whatever the thing. You come and tell me these things, otherwise I won't even know, right? And therefore, to minimize it, not rocket science. Other countries have done it. It has brought corruption down. And then we will use digitalization. Digital public platform is needed. 20 years ago, when I was in the bank, the Prime Minister called me and said, how do you use information technology for development? Cutting a long story short, we created the Sri Lanka program, we created the ICT agency. I created it virtually like a private party, government-owned, to give it the flexibility of employing the best brains in the country, right? And we rolled out the project. 5 years down the road, the whole thing got politicized. It went in another direction. I was happy to hear the new president saying digitalization is an important thing, and he's appointed an advisor for it, and I welcome that. The advisor, Dr. Hans, and I worked together on the earlier program as well, right? And I think that's the right way to go, and we will make sure that digitalization happens, because that reduces corruption, increases efficiency for everybody. So there are so many things to be done, and it has to be done. So you need clean people, you need experienced people. Just by education, you can't do it. You need experienced people, and then, of course, you need education. So I'm hoping that the voter will carefully think about that and cast their vote. So thank you really for asking me that question.
Eran, you said you are for more youth and women in politics, but your party has not done it. Only 16 women are there out of 291 people. Why is this?
Yeah, I can't deny that what our party has done is insufficient. I have got Shiha to the place that we need a change. And what we did in 2018 is we brought a quota for women's participation in local government. We need a quota, minimum quota, at least 25% of women's participation in the Sri Lankan parliament. We have to do it by law. If you analyze every party, it's way, way, way down. Women's participation is way, way down in all the parties. But I'm saying option 1 is never to have quotas. Option 2, second best option, shall I put it, is to have a quota. And that's the way to change it. And after a while, it will correct itself, maybe 20 years from now, and then you can take the quota away. We definitely need women in politics. We need them in lawmaking. It's like, I had a mother and a father. They brought me up. My dad looked at me in one way. My mother looked at me in a different way. I have 2 children. My wife and I basically are 2 different personalities. We look at our children in different ways. They had the benefit of 4 eyes rather than 2. In lawmaking in this country for 75 years, 2 eyes lawmaking. That's why we need women in the chamber making laws and commenting on laws. That's how our country goes forward. And if it's not happening naturally, let's do it by law. Let's put a quota and get the women in.
But you don't need laws to that, Eran. I mean, the parties, themselves, they can do it, like increasing the nominations for women. But unfortunately, that is not happening in Sri Lanka. I don't know why. Because even now, even after 2022, all this crisis that happened in the country, and people are asking for a different, new political culture, system change, and all that. But still, even a party like SJB, having 17 women is not, as you said, it's not sufficient at all.
I completely agree with you. And I think it's not just now, it's been happening right through. And that's why in local councils, we recognized it at that time. 25. And we were in government then, and we brought the law and we put it. If we are in government this time round, I am going to be working hard at it. It's a second best option. Let's not depend on individuals and leaders. Let's put it into law. That's a second best option. And let's make it work. And after it works for a while, right, a decade or 2, it'll automatically settle itself and it'll reverse. Women today, and I'm proud about this in Sri Lanka, they created that big con, nothing happened for 75 years con. We say, I mean, in 1948, we were importing 64% of our rice requirements to this country. By 1980s, we were self-sufficient in rice. Why? Because the irrigation systems were actually worked out. Health is the same, right? Lots of advancements in free health. In free education, lots of advancements in free education as well. You see, so women today, because of the education system, O levels ahead, A levels ahead. Universities, in most faculties in the country, more women. And then if you take professional education today, right, lots of women in professional education. Glass ceiling still exists in the private sector as well. Unacceptable. It needs to change. In the public sector, to a lesser extent, it does exist. So we need women are educated. We need to create the environment for them. For sure, in lawmaking, we need to create the environment for them at the workplace, in providing facilities so that they could take care of their children. The government can do something else, and that is, right, we need to provide maternity benefits. The cost of maternity could be provided by the state, so the private sector doesn't then discriminate among employing women and men, because it's a cost for them to employ women. So women are absolutely important. Then, looking at it from a selfish point of view, if they are educated and if they can be brought into the workforce, because they are only about 32%, definitely it will increase the GDP in the country.
Eran, if I ask you this, how would you serve the public in the event you lose the election?
I will always continue to serve the public. I moved from an international bank, and normally what happens in an international bank, Sri Lanka is a very small market. They try to move you overseas. And so I decided, no, I'm not going to move overseas. Shiha, I'm brainwashed by my mom. And my mom one day said to me, Eran, you didn't decide to be born in this country. She said, you were born and you were told it was Sri Lanka. Eran, you didn't decide to be born to the singular race, she told me. You were born and you were told you were a Sinhalese. Eran, you didn't decide to be born to the Wickramaratne family. You were told later your name was Wickramaratne. Eran, you didn't choose your father. She said that with a laugh, right? What did she say to me? She told me that everybody is born equal. Never hold people responsible for choices that they haven't made. And that has driven my philosophy. And I had 3 brothers then, when she told me the story. Now I have 3 brothers and a sister. She told me then, Eran, you are born in this country with a purpose, responsibility to family, to society and the country. And that's why you had to fulfill that purpose. So I'm driven by that. I created a new bank. And then I went to head the Carnegie National Development Bank. And then I stepped into politics. But outside politics, I did a lot of things outside politics. When I was a banker, I helped the government even in the peace process. When I was a banker, I helped with East Sri Lanka and the ICT agency. I have also created 2 educational institutions already in this country. I never mention it. I want them to function independently and to see it grow. There are so many things to be done in this country, right? Part of it is as a legislator, or part of it is as a part of the executive in the country. And if that opportunity, voters decide, people like I should be there doing that, I'll certainly do that. Otherwise, there are so many other things that we need to do in improving the living standards of the people in this country. And there's so many ideas. And I certainly will tell you that I won't be looking for employment because there are so many things.
You won't leave the country, right?
Never.
Okay. Just want to ask you now, the way the previous government handled the IMF reforms, the economic reforms under the IMF program, plus the debt restructuring. How do you see these things going forward under a different regime, different policies? How do you see that?
I think the immediate IMF thing, there's no option. If whichever government will have to stay with the DSA, right, and proceed from there, right. Then the really some changes can be done, right, on details, on taxation, and who do you tax, from whom do you get the revenues you need, and some of those changes could be done. Provided if you give a relief at one end, you'll have to make sure that you have a revenue at another end to balance it off. I think the harder decisions are going to come in wider than the fiscal consolidation program. It's actually in the reforms. And that's where I think a government outside us, I think, will struggle.
Okay, I think it's time. It's time to conclude this.
Yeah.
The last question I want to ask: why should people vote for you and elect as a parliamentarian or a minister? I don't know where will you end, but why should they elect you?
If they think that I'm clean, first criteria. If they think that I'm experienced and of course educated, I would say that would be the criteria for them to decide whether they should be voting for me or not.
Thank you, Eran. Thank you for coming here and having your thoughts with us. Please subscribe our channel, YouTube channel, and let's meet in another program. Thank you, Eran, and thank you, Indika. We'll meet in another program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.